The galaxy had always laughed at Earth, a small blue world, fragile and unarmored, wrapped in thin air and weaker gravity than most predators would dare call home. The great hunting clans of the Kethri came here for sport, not for war. Humans, to them, were soft-bodied bipeds, barely more than clever prey, unarmored skin stretched over brittle bones. No claws, no fangs, no natural weapons save the tools they fashioned from stone and steel. The hunt was supposed to be simple. The Kethri had landed under the cover of night, fanning across the forests of the northern continent. Their armor shimmered like wet obsidian, masking their heat signatures. They whispered in their own guttural tongue, laughing at the thought of trophies, skulls strung on chains, pelts tanned and hung in their feast halls. Humanity's woods were thick, yes, but not dangerous, not to them. Their leader, Varkesh, had been the first to mock. They breathe like wounded animals. You can hear their lungs breaking in their chests. When they run, they bleed heat into the night like torches. This hunt will be swift. We will take them skin to marrow and return before their sun burns the mist away. And for a time, it seemed true. They flushed the first humans from their shelters, small groups stumbling barefoot through the trees, lungs ragged, clothes torn. Easy prey. Their projectiles, rifles, pistols, crude hunting weapons, barely scratched the armor. The Kethri drove them like cattle, laughing as plasma bolts shredded bark around them, herding them deeper into the forest. But then the forest grew quiet. It was subtle at first. The wind no longer carried the rustle of small creatures. The night, chorus of insects fell away. The owls and wolves of the human land had gone silent. Predators noticed silence. One of the hunters muttered uneasily, his mandibles twitching. "Why does the wood hush? Even the vermin hide." Varkesh dismissed it with a growl. "The forest bends before hunters. Even animals sense their betters." But when they pushed deeper, chasing the scattered humans, the stillness grew heavier. The silence pressed in against their eardrums. Not a single wing beat, not a single chirp. The only sound was their own footfalls and the rasp of their breathing. And then they found the first body. A Kethri hunter, one of their own, sprawled against a tree. His chest plate was shattered, not pierced by plasma, not burned by energy, but broken inward, as if struck again and again by something blunt and merciless. His blood steamed against the cold earth. His helmet had been torn away, his throat shredded by something jagged. No human weapon had done this. The hunters stared. A ripple of unease traveled through the pack. "Impossible," hissed Varkesh. "The prey has no strength for this. They fall when we strike them once. They are soft, fragile, but the body did not lie." The trail led onward. Bootprints, human bootprints, surrounded the corpse, many feet, light steps, barefoot in some places. Humans had been here. Yet the strangest part was not the death. It was what the humans had left behind. Scrawled in mud and blood on the bark of a tree was a mark. 3 crude lines slashed downward, and beneath it a single word written in the human's tongue. Run. The hunters bristled. To be mocked by prey was an insult older than war. They surged forward, eager to find these insolent creatures. The air grew colder as the forest thickened, mist rising from the soil in pale ribbons. Their optics flickered with interference, their sensors picking up phantom signatures, heat there one moment, gone the next. And then came the whispers. Not Kethri voices. not human cries of terror. Something in between, low, breathless, words carried on the wind threading through the trees. The hunters froze, straining their senses, a phrase repeated just at the edge of hearing, human tongue, rough, hoarse. "You bleed too." The pack turned, scanning the fog. Nothing. Then a plasma bolt cracked through the night, searing past Varkesh's head and exploding against a trunk. The hunters dove, spreading into formation, weapons drawn, but no enemy revealed themselves. Only a flicker of movement, shadows between trees gone in an instant. The Kethri returned fire, scorching the forest. Branches fell, smoke billowed, sparks danced across the ground, but no bodies fell. It was not a battle, it was taunting. They pushed harder, lungs rasping in the dense air. The hunt stretched from hours into a night with no end. Their targets did not stop. They did not collapse. Always ahead, always out of reach, leaving only traps. Pits dug in the earth, branches spiked with sharpened wood, lines strung to trip armored legs. Nothing sophisticated, nothing advanced, but always there, always waiting. One by one, hunters fell. Not in glorious combat, but broken by exhaustion, their armor weighing them down as the humans pressed deeper, deeper, deeper into the forest. Varkesh began to understand. The prey was not fighting to win, they were fighting to last. At dawn, the pack staggered into a clearing. Their armor was caked in mud, their throats raw, their pace faltering. And there, waiting at the far tree line, stood a single human. He was tall but gaunt, shirt torn, blood down his arm, face streaked with dirt. He carried no weapon but a length of wood, sharpened at one end. He did not run, he only stared. Breathing, slow, eyes hollow, steady, unblinking. One of the hunters snarled and raised his rifle. The human raised a single finger to his lips. Silence. And in that silence, the Kethri realized something. The forest was not quiet because they were predators. The forest was quiet because something worse was hunting with the humans. Something they could not yet see. The trees shuddered. A low sound rose deep in the earth, like a heartbeat in the soil, and for the first time the hunters felt it. Fear. The human stands silent, while the forest itself seems to awaken as an unseen force joins the hunt. The silence stretched so long it felt alive. The human in the clearing didn't move. His chest rose and fell, slow as if asleep, eyes fixed on the pack. His face was battered, streaked with blood and grime, yet there was no plea, no terror. Just that hollow stare. Varikesh snarled to his hunters, "Take him! I'll mount his skull over my hearth!" The nearest Kethri raised his rifle, plasma coiled in the barrel, whining. The human shifted. Only slightly. A tilt of the head, and then the forest answered. Branches cracked, heavy and deliberate. The mist thickened, swallowing the tree line. Figures stirred in the haze, more humans, shadows peeling from the fog, not charging, not crying out, just stepping. Forward, slow and measured, like spectres called from the soil. The lone human lowered his sharpened stick, planting it in the earth. His hand stayed there, steady as if staking a claim. The plasma bolt never fired. Because before the hunters, finger could twitch, a stone the size of a fist shattered his visor, caving half his faceplate inward. He collapsed without a sound, blood bubbling where glass and bone met. The humans had struck first, with nothing but rock. A ripple of unease swept the Kethri formation. The mist, closed tighter, filling their optics with static. Shadows danced.
"In all directions! Circle up!" barked Varkesh. Armor clashed as the hunters formed a perimeter, rifles out. Their breath rasped in the damp air. They fired warning blasts into the haze.
Trees scorched, bark split, smoke spiraled upward, but the humans did not scatter. They kept moving, slow, deliberate. The sound of their feet was wrong, too many, too close. The Kethri counted at least 24 shapes shifting in and out of sight. Yet, their scans showed nothing, no heat, no bodies, only interference. And then came the laughter, not loud, not raucous, dry, hoarse. A man's laugh, low and ragged, echoing from tree to tree. It came from everywhere. The hunters spun, mandibles clicking. Sweat slicked beneath their helmets. One whispered, "This is no prey." Varkesh roared, trying to drown the unease. "They bleed, they break, they are flesh and bone, hunt them down." But even as he barked, another hunter went down. A wire, just a simple cord of twisted vines, snapped across his legs, dragging him to the earth. Before he could rise, a human burst from the mist, slamming a sharpened stake down through the thin joint of his armor. The scream was cut short as mud swallowed them both. The Kethri fired into the fog. The human was gone, and the forest fell silent again. The pack tightened, breaths quickened. Hours passed like that. Small strikes, whispers, rocks and stakes and ropes where no sophisticated weapons could be. Yet with each clash, the hunters weakened. Their armor grew heavier, their movements sluggish. Their own fear drained them more than any wound. By midday, the mist burned away. The forest lay bare beneath a grey sun, and what they saw made their blood run cold. Every tree in the clearing was marked, slashed, with those same 3 lines, dozens, hundreds, carved into bark, smeared in mud, written in blood. The same message over and over, run. The hunters staggered back, their black armor suddenly feeling too small, too tight. And then came the drum, a sound from deeper in the forest, a slow, steady rhythm, a hollow thud of wood against hide. Once, twice, again. It was not music, it was a pulse. The humans were hunting by sound. One hunter panicked. He broke formation, sprinting toward the tree line. His armor crashed through branches, leaves tearing against his plating. A scream split the air. When the others rushed after him, they found his body dangling upside down from a tree, a crude snare cinched around his ankle. His helmet was gone. His eyes were wide, mouth filled with dirt. Still alive, but choking, thrashing. And there, scratched into the earth beneath him, one word, stay. Varkesh's mandibles clicked, a sound between fury and dread. His pack was shrinking. The humans weren't just running anymore. They were dragging the hunters deeper, step by step, stripping them down, breaking their will. He realized, with cold clarity, the prey had reversed the hunt. The Kethri pulled back to regroup, retreating into a ravine where cliffs rose high on either side. Their sensors finally picked up no movement, no whispers, no interference, just still air and rushing water below. Varkesh allowed himself a rasp of relief. They are flesh, they tire, they break, they cannot hold against us forever. But, as he spoke, a new sound rose, not drums, not whispers, breathing. The hunters turned, rifles raised, and there, at the mouth of the ravine, stood a single human woman. Barefoot, hair matted, face streaked with ash. She held nothing but a jagged stone knife. Her chest heaved, yet her eyes blazed. She did not run. She stepped forward once, and with a voice hoarse but steady, she spoke. "You're not hunters anymore." The words hit like a blade. Then she cut her own palm, dragging the knife across her skin, letting the blood drip onto the ground. She raised her hand, red and shaking. The forest answered her call. Shadows filled the cliffs above, dozens of figures, humans, filthy, bloodied, silent, staring down with hollow eyes. The hunters raised their rifles, panic lacing their movements, and then the humans screamed, ragged, broken-throated, a sound not of fear, but defiance. The ravine erupted in echoes. Stones rained from above, ropes snapped tight, traps triggered all at once. The Kethri fired blindly, the gorge filling with smoke and dust. Varkesh roared, firing upward, his vision blurred by panic and grit. When the dust cleared, half his pack lay broken, crushed by rocks, dragged into pits, throats cut in the chaos. The survivors stumbled, panting, armor cracked, and then, in the silence that followed, every human vanished once more into the trees. Only the woman remained, standing at the edge of the ravine. Her bloody hand lifted again. She whispered one word, "Soon," then she was gone. The hunters stood in the ruin of their own strength, lungs ragged, eyes wide. For the first time in their history, the Kethri felt the true shape of prey that does not yield. And in the trees above, unseen, more whispers passed through the leaves. "You bleed too." The sound circled them, closing in, and the forest grew quiet again. The ambush leaves half the alien pack dead, survivors shaken, and the realization setting in that the humans are no longer prey. The forest silence returns, signaling the next phase of the hunt. The ravines stank of alien blood. The survivors huddled among the broken bodies of their kin, armor smeared in mud, mandibles twitching with ragged breath. They had never known being hunt like this, not once in the long history of their clans. Prey did not fight this way. Prey ran, screamed, died. But humans did not run anymore. They lingered in the mist, haunting the edges of vision. They left messages carved in bark, smeared in blood whispered from the shadows. They attacked not for trophies, but to weaken, to exhaust, to break will itself. And worse than the strikes was the silence between them. Every time the forest fell still, the Kethri knew something waited. Not if, not maybe, always. Varkesh stood at the center of his dwindling pack, glaring into the trees. His armor was dented, his weapons caked in ash. He had hunted on volcanic worlds where the air could flay skin in a breath. He had stalked beasts the size of fortress walls. He had never felt his heart claw against his ribs like this. He wanted to roar, to shake the silence, to remind his pack of who they were, but his throat was dry. His voice would have cracked. One of the younger hunters muttered, "The prey. They do not stop." Another hissed back, "They are not prey. They are something else." The words were poison. Varkesh slammed a clawed fist against his chestplate. "They bleed. They fall. They are flesh. Remember this." But even as he spoke, a sound rose in the distance. Not drums this time, not whispers. Footsteps. Dozens of them. The Kethri spun toward the noise, rifles raised. The sound came steady, measured, deliberate, approaching from every direction. Figures appeared in the trees. Humans. Too many to count. Filthy, blood-streaked, moving with the same slow precision, each step in rhythm with the next. They carried sticks, stones, jagged spears. Some had nothing but their bare hands. They did not charge, they only circled. The Kethri aimed, mandibles clacking in fear. Their fingers tightened on the triggers. The humans stopped as one, and then, in eerie unison, they sat. Cross-legged in the dirt, eyes hollow, breathing slow. Watching, not attacking.
Not running, just waiting. The hunters stared, pulses spiking. Their weapons shook in their claws. This was not combat, it was judgment. The silence stretched until it broke one of them. A hunter screamed and fired, plasma bolts scorching the seated
humans. But they did not move. The plasma burned bark, split trunks filled the clearing with smoke. Yet when it cleared, the humans were gone. All of them. Vanished. Only the scorched earth remained, and on it, smeared in blood, a new word. Still, the pack recoiled, their optics scrambled with interference again, shadows twisted in their HUDs. Heat. Signatures flickered like phantoms. Varkesh snarled to hide his unease. They are few, they use illusions, tricks, they bleed. But his words rang hollow. His hunter's eyes betrayed their disbelief. The forest closed tighter, branches clawing at their armor, roots tangling their feet. The air grew heavy, thick, with damp. Their own breathing rasped loud in their helmets. Hours passed. Hunger gnawed, thirst burned. Their bodies dragged heavier with each step. Humans were small, weak, breakable, but they did not stop. They did not slow. They did not collapse. The Kethri did. By dusk, 2 hunters fell behind, stumbling under the weight of their armor. They begged Varkesh to stop, to rest. He turned, fury flashing. Rest, and you die, but the forest answered for him. Arrows, crude, shafts of wood tipped with sharpened stone, rained from above. Not enough to pierce plating, but enough to strike joints, to wedge in seams, to sting with persistence. The wounded hunters staggered. The humans came with them, not in a charge. In silence, figures dropped from trees, crawling from brush, erupting. From soil, dozens, maybe more, faces painted in mud, eyes gleaming with fever. The lagging hunters were dragged down, screaming, blades scraping against armor as crude hands found gaps and weaknesses. The screams gurgled into silence. The rest of the pack fired burning trees, splitting earth. But the humans vanished again, leaving only the broken armor of their victims and the word carved deep into a fallen trunk. Enough, the survivors stumbled on, fewer with every hour. Fear clawed at them worse than hunger. They could not rest. They could not stop. Every pause brought whispers, rocks, ropes, blood. The prey did not need to kill them all at once. The prey only needed time. By nightfall, Varkesh counted fewer than half his hunters still standing. Their faces twitched with exhaustion, mandibles clicking uncontrollably. Their pride, the armor, the weapons, the centuries of dominance felt like chains dragging them down. He could not admit it aloud, but he knew it. The hunt was lost. The question now was how many would crawl out alive. Then came the horn, a single blast, low and terrible, rolling through the forest. Not human-made, not any sound they had ever catalogued. It shook the earth beneath their feet. Birds scattered, branches cracked, the air itself vibrated. The humans answered in screams, dozens, hundreds, from every side. The pack staggered into a clearing, gasping, weapons trembling, and there, at the far edge, torches flared to life. Humans, dozens of them, standing with flames in their hands, shadows stretching tall against the trees. At their center was the woman from the ravine, blood still dried across her palm, her hair wild in the firelight, her eyes burned with something beyond rage. She raised her torch high, and every human around her slammed their fists against their chests, once, twice. The sound rolled like thunder. The Kethri froze, because in that sound they heard something they had never heard from prey: unity, defiance, and a promise. The humans surged forward, fire and fury crashing into the clearing. The Kethri raised their weapons, roaring in desperation. Plasma screamed, fire answered. And in the chaos, Varkesh locked eyes with the woman. Her lips moved, not loud, not shouted, but he saw the word, hunt, and she came for him. The humans stop haunting from the shadows and finally strike in force, unified, carrying fire into the night, with the human leader personally charging Varkesh. The clearing became an inferno. Fire leapt from branch to branch, fed by dry bark and resin. Smoke poured upward in black columns, choking the air. Burning eyes, plasma bolts screamed through the haze, splitting trunks, shattering stone. Sparks showered the ground as humans surged forward, torches raised, their screams ragged, inhuman.
In their fury, the Kethri fired into the mass, disciplined bursts of plasma ripping holes through flesh. Humans fell, bodies burning, limbs torn away. But for everyone who dropped, two more filled the gap. Barefoot, half naked, armed with sticks
And stones, they charged into the storm without hesitation. Varkesh roared above the chaos, his rifle spitting blue fire. He cut through a man's chest, split another's skull, burned a woman's leg to cinder. Yet still they came. One leapt onto his back, clawing at the seals of his helmet with bloody hands. Varkesh slammed him into a tree, crushing bone. But even as the body slid lifeless, another was already there, screaming into his faceplate, eyes burning with madness. The pack held formation, rifles blazing, but the humans were too many, too close. Plasma weapons were made for range, for clean strikes. At arm's length, they were slow, clumsy, and the humans knew it. They swarmed legs, clawed at joints, drove, sharpened stakes into gaps. Armor cracked under stones, swung from slings. Knives of scavenged steel pried beneath plating. Every strike was desperate, reckless, but together they bled the hunters inch by inch. Varkesh saw his hunters fall. One dragged into the flames, armor screaming as fire licked its seals. Another toppled beneath a tide of bodies, clawed arms. Disappearing in a sea of fists and blades, the pack was shrinking. Again, push forward, Varkesh roared. Burn them out. The hunters surged, armor clashing, rifles flaring. They carved a path through bodies, stepping over the fallen, smoke and fire thickening with every stride. But the forest itself seemed to close behind them. Trees toppled, set alight by torches. Shadows danced with firelight, blocking every exit. These humans were herding them. Again. And then Varkesh saw her. The woman with the bloodied palm, standing tall in the inferno, hair wild in the smoke, eyes fixed on him. She held no weapon but a torch, flames flickering in the wind. She did not scream, she did not charge. She only walked forward, slow, deliberate, through the chaos, their eyes locked through his visor. And in that heartbeat, Varkesh felt something he had never known in prey. Not hatred, not fear. Conviction. The humans believed. She hurled the torch. It struck the earth at his feet, flames spreading across dry roots, racing outward, and as the fire leapt higher, the humans screamed again, a chorus of broken throats that shook the trees. The Kethri staggered, not from wounds, from sound. It was not the cry of prey. It was the roar of something ancient, something that would not yield. The hunters broke formation. Some turned to flee. Varkesh bellowed after them, rage cutting through smoke. "Stand! Stand! Or you are carrion!" But his voice was lost over the firestorm. One by one his hunters scattered into the trees. Plasma bolts fired wild, striking nothing. Humans swarmed after them, shadows in smoke, dragging them down into the dark. Varkesh fought to hold ground, rifle burning hot in his hands. He tore through 3, 4, 5 more bodies. His armor steamed with blood, his visor cracked, his
lungs heaving. Still they came, a man with one arm gone, a woman with an arrow through her side, a boy no older than a cub, face painted in ash. Every one of them bleeding, every one of them relentless. They should have collapsed. They should have broken, but pain was not weakness here.
Pain was fuel. And Varkesh realized too late that he had never hunted prey like this, because there was no prey like this. These creatures did not hunt for sport. They hunted because survival was carved into their marrow. The flames closed tighter. Smoke burned his throat raw. The woman stepped closer, her torchlight glinting across his cracked visor. She raised her hand, blood dried black across her palm, and then she whispered, "You're tired." The words slid into his bones. He was tired. His arms trembled. His chest heaved. His pack was broken. His weapons heavy. His blood roaring in his ears. He raised his rifle, but she was gone, vanished into smoke. Something slammed into his side, a stake driven through his armor's seam. He roared, swinging his weapon, burning the attacker into ash. But another came, and another.
Hands clawed, teeth bit, stones cracked against plating. He staggered, knees buckling, and then the horn sounded again, deep, low, rolling through the burning forest. The humans answered in screams, their fury doubled. Varkesh saw shadows closing from every side.
He turned in circles, plasma bolts firing wild. The smoke suffocated, the fire blinded, the screams pierced. And for the first time in his long life, Varkesh felt the weight of death, not in glory, not in triumph, but in inevitability. The hunt was no longer theirs. The prey had become something else, something worse. And in the heart of the firestorm, as the screams closed in, he knew the Kethri were not the hunters anymore. The Kethri pack is broken in fire and chaos. Varkesh is left staggering in the flames, surrounded, realizing the hunt has completely turned. The fire did not burn clean. It smoldered, slow and choking, filling the forest with a red haze. Smoke clung to the ground, curling through roots and rocks, thick enough to sting eyes even through helmets. The flames had scattered the pack, tearing them from one another. The hunters who survived fled in different directions, stumbling blind, through ash and embers. Varkesh staggered among them, his visor cracked, his rifle hot and sputtering. Every breath was fire in his throat. His armor was dented, smeared with blood, alien and human alike. The screams of battle had faded, replaced by the groan of collapsing trees and the crackle of burning undergrowth. And in that silence, the truth settled over him. The pack was gone. Of the 20 hunters who had landed with him, he had seen fewer than 7 escape the flames. The rest were ash, broken bodies, or dragged screaming into the mist. They had come for trophies. They had come to mount skulls and skins in their feast halls. Instead, they had been butchered like cattle, scattered like frightened animals, and still the humans had not stopped. Through the smoke, Varkesh saw movement. a shadow darting between trees. He raised his rifle, fired a burst. The bolt cut nothing but ash. Another shadow behind him, another to his left. Every time he turned, they were gone. Not attacking, watching, his mandibles clicked tight. Prey did
not watch. Prey did not wait. He stumbled onward, following the faint trail of plasma burns scorched into trunks, a path left by another survivor. His lungs rasped, his muscles trembled.
For the first time in his life, he felt the weight of his own armor like a chain. The trail ended in a clearing, and in the clearing, a body. One of his hunters lay face up, helmet torn away. His eyes were open, mouth filled with dirt. His chest, plate, was pried apart at the seams, ribs shattered, organs exposed. Around him, the ground was smeared with blood in wide arcs, as if many hands had dragged him here. Beside the body was a word, written in blood across the earth. Wait, Varkesh's.
Mandibles twitched.
His claws flexed on the rifle grip. He turned, scanning the tree line. Whispers low, hoarse, carried by the smoke. You bleed too. He fired into the haze, bolts, splitting trunks, lighting branches aflame. The echoes rolled, but no bodies fell. The high whisper came again, louder, from behind him this time. You bleed too. He spun, heart clawing in his chest, and then a stone struck his visor. Not enough to break it further, but enough to mock. He roared, firing blind into the trees. When the echoes died, the forest answered with silence, and then laughter, not human.
Laughter, not alien, something twisted between. Varkesh backed into the clearing, rifle raised, eyes darting. His pulse thundered in his ears. He wanted to run, but running would only feed the shadows. He wanted to fight, but the enemy would
not show themselves. The prey was everywhere. The prey was nowhere, and his pack was gone. Elsewhere, two survivors stumbled together through the haze. Their names were lost in the static of Varkesh's comms, but he could see their shapes moving through smoke, figures in black armor.
Staggering, clutching rifles, they whispered to each other, low and frantic. Where is Varkesh? Where is the pack? Dead. All dead.
We must reach the ship, call the vessel, end this cursed world. The other shook his head, mandibles clicking. No signal. The forest kills our voice. They moved on, slower and slower, until the whispers returned. You bleed too, both.
Froze, rifles snapping toward the sound. The whisper came again, closer. You bleed too. Their nerves broke. One fired into the smoke, bolts screaming.
The other screamed in fury, joining him, cutting the forest into ash. When the firing ended, silence fell again. Then came a hail of stones, crude, jagged, dozens of them, raining from above. They clanged against armor, cracked visors, dented plating.
Harmless in isolation, devastating together, one hunter fell, disoriented, stumbling to his knees, and then they came. Humans, dozens, bursting from the smoke, mud-streaked, eyes burning.
They swarmed him, knives and rocks and sharpened sticks slamming into his armor's seams. He roared, plasma bolts searing bodies in every direction, but the tide smothered him. His screams rose, then drowned. The last survivor fled, mandibles.
Shrieking in panic, he crashed through branches, his heavy boots pounding.
His rifle fired wild, plasma streaking into nothing. The whispers followed him. You bleed too. He stumbled, fell, scrambled to his feet. His armor cracked, his breathing ragged. He could not see them. He could not hear his kin, only the whispers. And then, ahead, a figure emerged from the smoke, the woman. Her palms still bloodied, her eyes steady, her face streaked with ash. She carried nothing but a stone knife. The hunter raised his rifle. Plasma screamed. The woman vanished, and behind him,
hands dragged him into the smoke.
his shrieks tore through the forest, then ended with a wet crack. Varkesh heard it all, the gunfire, the screams, the silence. He was alone, and in that silence he realized something else. The humans were not killing for numbers, not for survival.
Anymore. They were killing for him. Every strike, every whisper, every body left in the dirt with a word scrawled beside it. They were drawing him deeper.
Step by step, he staggered on, each breath a roar in his lungs, each step heavier than the last. His visor flickered with static, his comms dead. His armor felt like a coffin, and then he saw it, a shape in the smoke, tall, thin, standing still, a human. Not the woman, not the boy. Someone else. Barefoot, shirtless, body covered in mud and blood. His chest rose and fell in slow rhythm. His eyes were hollow, yet burning. He carried nothing. Varkesh raised his rifle. The human raised a hand and... From every side the whispers came at once. You bleed too. The forest erupted in sound. Screams, drums, stones slamming against trunks, fire crackling, every noise at once. Varkesh dropped to one knee, claws clutching his head. His visor scrambled, optics failing. His rifle sputtered, overheated. The human stepped closer, slow, deliberate, unblinking, and Varkesh realized with cold certainty he was not the hunter anymore. He was the prey. The aliens are reduced to scattered survivors, picked apart by whispers and crude weapons. Varkesh is left alone, cornered by a silent human who advances as the forest itself roars. The smoke did not lift. It thickened, turned the forest into a coffin where every step echoed too loud. Varkesh moved through it, hunched, claws dragging, rifle clutched like a child holds a toy. His optics flickered, heat warnings pulsed in his visor, his lungs scraped the inside of his chest, and the whispers never stopped. You bleed too, sometimes near, sometimes far. Sometimes whispered from the trees above, sometimes from the ground at his feet. Always the same words. Always the same voice. At first, he thought it was many humans. But the longer it went on, the more he realized, no. It was one voice, repeated, carried, passed from throat to throat like a signal fire burning through flesh. The forest itself was teaching them to speak as one. He tripped over a root, fell to his knees, his claws dug into the dirt, blackened from ash and blood. A hiss tore from his mandibles, part raw, part sob. He was Varkesh of the blooded fang, victor of 7 hunts across 3 systems. He had torn titans down with his bare claws. He had slaughtered armies, mounted their skulls as proof of his strength, and here he crawled. A stone rolled into the dirt before him. Small, harmless. He picked it up without thinking, claws trembling. The humans had killed 3 of his kin, with stones, not guns, not fire. Stones. How he turned it in his hand. It was jagged, rough, the edges sharp enough to cut his finger. A child's toy, a nothing. He squeezed it until his palm bled. Behind him, footsteps. He turned.
Rifle snapping up. A figure stepped from the smoke, human, thin, barefoot, shirtless, body painted with mud and streaked with blood, the same one from before, his eyes burned without blinking. He did not flinch at the rifle pointed at his chest. Stop!
Varkesh barked, his mandibles clicking, voice cracking through the translator. Stop! The human did not stop. Back, or die. The human did not back. Varkesh's claws shook. He pulled the trigger. Plasma screamed through the haze. Yet the human was gone. Behind him, another footstep. He whirled. Nothing. Then to his right, a whisper. Not the voice from before. This was a different throat, raw and torn, but the same words. You bleed too. Another behind him from a different
mouth. You bleed too. Another and another. A chorus. He fired until his rifle hissed dry.
Bolts split trees, set branches alight, burned holes into nothing. Then silence until a rock hit his back. Small, harmless. Then another and another. The chorus of whispers rose into chants, low, rhythm, in unison. You bleed too. You bleed.
Too. You bleed too. His knees buckled. His claws pressed against his ears, but the chant crawled under his armor, wormed into his blood. It was not sound anymore.
It was rhythm, a heartbeat. He stumbled forward, broke through the haze into another clearing. Bodies, his kin, all of them dragged here, arranged in a circle, some stripped of armor, some torn apart, all marked. Across their chests carved with knives, the same word again and again. Wait! At the center of the circle the woman stood, her palms still raw, her eyes unblinking. Beside her was the boy, alive, face smeared in soot, blood on his chin, standing tall beside her, as if he were carved from stone. Varkesh raised his rifle, empty though it was. His mandibles quivered. His legs shook. The woman did not move. The boy did not move. Behind them in the smoke, shapes gathered. Dozens, maybe hundreds, silent, watching. For the first time in his life, Varkesh felt the cold press of a truth. He could not claw away. He had not been hunting prey. He had been feeding something else. The woman raised her hand. Her voice was a rasp, broken but strong enough to split the silence. Run! Varkesh did not move. Her eyes narrowed. Run! The boy spoke then. His voice cracked, but it carried. Run! The chant rose again, hundreds of throats beating. The same word against the night. Run! 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 Varkesh staggered back. His claws slipped on blood. He turned, stumbled into the smoke, running though every muscle screamed. His armor weighed him down like stone. His lungs tore with fire. His mind shattered with every step, and behind him the forest chanted, Run! But when he slowed, when his legs faltered, another chant would replace it. You bleed too. He fell once, dragged himself up, fell again. His vision blurred, his body shaking. The forest stretched into madness, every tree a figure, every shadow an enemy. Somewhere behind he heard his kin screaming again. Voices pulled from their dead throats, mocked, repeated, and beneath it all, his own mind whispered back at him, You bleed too. He broke into a ravine, tumbling down rocks, landing hard enough to crack armor. He lay there gasping, claws clutching his chest. Blood leaked from his mouth, and across from him on the opposite side of the ravine stood the human again, the shirtless one, mud, blood, eyes burning. He did not move, he did not speak. He only raised his hand, and the chant roared back. To life you bleed too. Varkesh's screams split the forest, half fury, half terror. He raised his rifle, but it only clicked, dry and dead. The human smiled. Varkesh finally breaks. The humans are no longer individuals. They are one voice, one will. He realizes the hunt has become a ritual, and he is the sacrifice. The ravine echoed with his scream. Varkesh scrambled backward, claws gouging rock, his rifle clattering useless against stone. Across the gap, the human did not move. He stood still as if carved into the earth, eyes reflecting firelight, hand raised in a gesture that felt more like judgment than threat. The chant rolled through the forest, not from throats alone, but from the ground itself, from the burning canopy above, from the air pressed into his lungs. You bleed too. You bleed too. You bleed too. Varkesh clutched his head, but the words burrowed through armor, into marrow. His heart thundered in the same rhythm, every beat repeating their chant until his own blood sang the words against his will. He staggered to his feet, tore himself up the ravine wall, claws slipping, boots scraping, armor dragging like chains. When he pulled himself over the edge, he collapsed, body shaking, gasping like a wounded animal. Silence. He looked back down into the ravine. Empty. The human was gone. Varkesh lurched forward, stumbling through trees. His visor showed nothing, but static, his comms drowned in whispers. He tore the helmet off, flinging it aside. It clattered against roots, cracked open like a skull. The air hit him raw. Smoke, ash, the stench of rot. His mandibles clicked open, drawing breath in ragged gulps. And then he heard it. Not the chant, not the whispers. Something worse. Footsteps, slow, steady, heavy with intent. Behind him, he spun. Nothing. Ahead of him, he froze. His claws tightened.
On the useless rifle, the footsteps circled. They didn't hurry, they didn't chase. They herded. Every turn he made, the steps moved with him, always close enough to feel, but never close enough to see. He stumbled into another clearing, his breath
Caught. There were no bodies this time, no words carved in dirt. Only silence. At the center of the clearing was a tree, massive and old, its trunk wide enough to swallow him whole. Its bark was carved, scarred with hundreds of cuts, overlapping, layered. He stepped closer. His claws brushed the grooves. Faces, human. Faces gouged into the bark with knives and stones, crude, jagged, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Some screaming, some grinning, some hollow-eyed. And in the center, larger than the rest, his own. Varkesh staggered back, mandibles clicking in shock. The carving was unmistakable, the ridges of his crown, the shape of his mandibles, the jagged scar across his cheek. His face, staring back at him from wood. Fresh, still wet with sap that dripped like blood. The footsteps stopped. Behind the tree, a voice spoke. Not whispering now, not chanting. Do you feel it? The woman stepped into view. Her palm was still raw. Her eyes burned steady as before. Varkesh roared, raising his rifle, though he knew it was dead. "What are you?" Her gaze did not waver. "You bleed too." The chant surged through the forest again, but now it carried weight, not a taunt, a truth. She stepped closer, every step precise, unhurried, as if she had always been walking toward this moment. Varkesh stumbled back. His claws shook. "You cannot win. You are weak. You are prey." Her voice cut through his fury like a blade. And still, "We're here." The shapes emerged from the smoke. Not shadows now. Humans. Dozens of them. Bloodied, burned, limping, but upright. Their eyes hollow, their bodies broken in 100 places, yet they stood. Some carried knives, some carried rocks, most carried nothing. They did not rush him, they only closed the circle. Varkesh spun, his mandibles spread wide, his chest heaving. He was surrounded. Alone. The woman stopped a few paces away, her gaze locked on him. You thought pain makes us weak, she said. But pain is where we live. The boy stepped forward, his voice cracking but clear. You bleed too, the circle answered in one voice, not whispering now but roaring.
You bleed too! You bleed too! You bleed too! Varkesh raised his claws, bellowing, defiant. If they wanted his blood, he would drown them in it. He lunged at the woman. She did not move. Hands dragged him down from all sides. Human.
Bodies weak and broken, but unrelenting. Rocks slammed into joints, knives dug into seams, teeth sank into flesh. He roared, tearing free, flinging bodies aside. He slashed with claws, kicked, crushed skulls underfoot. Plasma grenades hissed on his belt. He ripped one free, triggered it, hurled it into the mob. The blast tore the clearing.
Open fire roaring, bodies flying. When the smoke cleared, the circle still stood, burned, broken, missing limbs, eyes hollow. Still standing, Varkesh fell to one knee. His breath rattled, his blood spilled hot through cracks in his armor, his vision blurred. The woman stepped closer, standing over him now. Hunter, she said, her voice quiet, almost
pitying. Look at yourself. Varkesh raised his head. He saw the circle, the humans, the faces carved in the tree, his kin's bodies strewn like offerings, his own blood dripping into dirt, and he understood. The hunt was over. The prey had taught the predator fear, but before he could collapse, the boy spoke again. They're not done with you yet. Varkesh turned his head. Through the smoke, new shapes emerged. Not humans, not hunters, something else. Tall, armored, alien silhouettes moving with precision, weapons glowing, more hunters, reinforcements. Varkesh's eyes widened, his mandibles spread in a twisted grin. He tried to laugh, but blood choked it. The woman only looked at him. Her eyes never left his. You brought them here, she said, and the forest went silent. The hunt shifts again. Just as Varkesh breaks under the human's endurance, new hunters arrive, alien reinforcements, stepping into a battlefield that no longer belongs to them. The reinforcements moved like blades. They stepped into the clearing through the smoke. In perfect formation, visors glowing, rifles raised, armor unmarred by fire or blood. Fresh hunters, untouched. 20 of them, maybe more, their boots crushing ash and bone beneath each step. Varkesh looked up from the dirt, blood bubbling in his mandibles. Relief swelled in his chest. His kin had come, his brothers, his salvation. But then he saw their eyes behind the visors. Cold, detached. They did not rush to him. They did not break formation. They looked past him at the circle of humans. The woman did not move. The boy did not flinch. The circle did not break. The newcomers raised their rifles. Plasma hummed, hungry. Varkesh forced himself to his feet. Staggering, blood dripping down his armor, he spread his arms, bellowing, "Kill them! Burn them! End this curse!" The commander tilted his head, visor gleaming. His voice came cold, filtered through command frequencies. "You are not blooded anymore." Varkesh froze. "What?" The commander's rifle shifted, barrel pointed at his chest. "You failed!" Plasma screamed. Varkesh was thrown back, armor splitting, blood spraying. He collapsed into dirt, clawing at the wound. His mandibles trembled in disbelief. The woman did not look away. Neither did the boy. The circle of humans stood silent as the reinforcements opened fire. Plasma bolts ripped through trees, shredded bark, seared bodies. The forest became a storm of light and smoke. Humans fell, limbs torn, flesh burned. Yet still they rose, dragging one another to their feet, charging through fire bare-handed. Rocks
flew, knives glinted, screams split the air. The hunters advanced in formation, plasma cutting down every figure that rushed them. But the humans did not scatter. They did not retreat.
They threw themselves forward again and again, bodies breaking but the line never thinning. The reinforcements slowed. Varkesh saw it through his haze of pain. Their formation faltered, rifles lifted higher, bolts fired wider. The line bent, not from human strength, from human refusal. For every one that fell, 2 more stepped forward, burned, bloodied, dragging their ruined bodies toward the fight. And then the chant rose again. You bleed too. This time it shook the air, a roar of 100 throats, so loud it drowned the plasma fire, so steady it bent the rhythm of battle. You bleed too! You bleed too! You bleed too! The commander barked orders, but his voice cracked under the noise. His formation staggered back a step, and the humans surged. They swarmed the first line, dragging hunters into the dirt, tearing rifles away with bare hands, snapping necks with stones tied to rope. Blood sprayed, alien shrieks mixing with human howls. The plasma storm broke. Rifles sputtered dry. Claws tore, teeth bit, knives plunged. Varkesh crawled forward, watching with wide, fevered eyes. The reinforcements, his salvation, were drowning. Drowning in bodies, in screams, in pain turned weapon. The forest itself roared with it. You bleed too. The commander fell last, his helmet torn away, his face slashed open by the boy's stone knife. His roar was cut short as hands dragged him down, knives and rocks finding seams, teeth tearing flesh. The clearing went still. Smoke hung heavy, blood-soaked dirt. Human bodies lay scattered among alien corpses, burned and broken, yet those still alive stood upright, limping, bleeding, unbowed. The woman walked through the silence, her palm raw, her eyes steady. She stepped over Varkesh where he lay in the dirt, staring up at her with broken pride. She did not speak. The boy stood beside her, chest heaving, face streaked in blood. His knife dripped. Varkesh rasped, mandibles trembling. Why? Why? Will you not fall? The woman looked down at him, her voice quiet but carrying through the dead forest. Because we already have. The words sank into him like a blade. His eyes dimmed, his breath rattled. He coughed blood into the dirt. The circle of survivors gathered behind her. Some leaned on each other. Some dragged shattered legs. Some could barely lift their heads. Yet their eyes burned. The woman turned, raised her hand. Silence fell again. The forest held its breath. And then news sound. Engines. Overhead, through the smoke and fire, the sky split with light. Dropships descending, more hunters, more reinforcements, dozens, hundreds. Varkesh's eyes flickered wide. His mandibles quivered in a final broken laugh. Now you will drown. The woman did not look at him. She looked up at the sky, her palm closing into a fist, and behind her the forest itself seemed to lean closer. Human endurance has broken the second wave, but the sky darkens with dropships. Hundreds more hunters are descending. The true test is about to begin. The sky burned with engines. Dropships tore through the clouds like falling stars, their hulls black and sharp, their underbellies glowing with descent fire. They came in waves, dozens, then scores, then more than the human eye could count. The forest trembled under the roar. Varkesh lay broken in the dirt, blood filling his mandibles, his chest a cage of fire. He laughed anyway. The sound was wet, bubbling, hollow. "They come," he rasped. "The hunt returns." The woman did not answer. She stood with her palm raised, eyes locked on the sky. The boy clutched her side, his knife slick with blood, his face ghost-pale but unflinching. The circle of humans remained. Fewer than half still stood. They were burned, bleeding, some missing fingers, some missing eyes, but none stepped back. Every gaze turned skyward, watching the dark tide descend. Engines screamed as the dropships broke the tree line. Their landing, struts, split soil, burning trees to cinders. Ramp after ramp crashed open and hunters poured out. Not 20, not 50, hundreds. An army of predators, rifles glowing, armor gleaming, mandibles clashing in anticipation. They moved as one. A wall of hunters spreading into formation, plasma rifles raised, targeting arrays locking. Varkesh coughed blood and sneered through his broken mandibles. "Now you will see, now your silence ends." The woman lowered her hand and the forest went quiet. No birds, no insects, no crackle of fire. Only silence so deep it pressed against bone. The hunters hesitated. The wall of predators, so eager, so certain, paused mid-step. Their eyes flicked between trees, scanning shadows. Their mandibles clicked uneasily. The commander of this new host barked orders, voice booming across the clearing. "Advance! Burn the ground! Leave nothing breathing!" The wall obeyed. Plasma rifles screamed, fire ripping through trunks, branches exploding into ash, the ground splitting with heat. The forest convulsed under the storm, but the humans did not scatter. They did not run. They stood in silence, waiting as the storm passed over them. Fire licked their skin, bolts seared their flesh. Still they stood, and when the firing ceased, when rifles hissed dry, the silence broke. "You bleed too." It began as a whisper from one throat, then another, then another. "You bleed too. You bleed too. You bleed too." The wall of hunters slowed. Their mandibles twitched. They shifted their grips, rifles suddenly heavier. The chant grew. "You
bleed too!" The sound rolled like thunder. A wave of human voices cracked and raw, yet bound together until it became one.
The sound pressed against the hunters' ears, rattled their armor, wormed into their blood. Some broke formation, a step back, a glance behind. The commander roared at them, mandibles flared, claws slashing the air. "Stand! They are nothing! Fire again!" But when the rifles lit, hands were shaking, bolts went wide, and the humans moved, not in panic, not in charge. Step by step, they advanced. Broken bodies dragging forward, burned flesh refusing to stay down, empty hands closing into fists. The chant thundered with each step. "You bleed too! You bleed too! You bleed too!" The wall of hunters faltered, lines bent, mandibles clicked in panic, their claws trembled on their weapons. They had never seen prey move like this. Prey did not march into fire. Prey did not rise when their bodies should be dead. Prey did not chant with voices that shook the ground. This was not prey, this was something else. The first clash broke like a storm. Humans crashed into hunters barehanded, knives slashing at armor seams, rocks breaking visors, sticks driven into throats. Hunters roared, claws tearing, rifles slamming into bodies like clubs. But the humans did not stop. Every strike that dropped one only pulled another closer. Every wound they suffered only made the chant louder. Varkesh dragged himself up against a tree, vision swimming, blood flooding his chest. He watched with wide, delirious eyes. His kin, his proud hunters, were drowning in the same tide that
had broken him. He whispered the words with them, his mandibles trembling. You bleed too. The commander fought in the center, his claws soaked in human blood, his rifle splitting bodies in half. He roared, a sound that shook leaves.
From branches, and still the humans surged. A man with one arm leapt on his back, teeth sinking into the commander's throat. A woman with no eyes drove a sharpened stick into his chest. The boy with the stone knife plunged it again and again into the gaps of his armor, screaming until his voice broke. The commander collapsed, dragged down into mud and blood, his roar. Smothered beneath human hands, the hunters saw it. They broke. Formation shattered. Plasma rifles dropped. Some fled into the trees. Others roared in panic, firing wild. Bolts, scorching allies, but the chant followed them into the smoke. You bleed.
Too. You bleed too. You bleed too. The forest devoured them. When the silence finally returned, the ground was thick with bodies, alien and human both. Blood-soaked roots turned soil black, filled the air with iron stench. Only a handful
of humans still stood. The woman. The boy. A few dozen more, all broken, all shaking, but alive. Varkesh stared at them, mandibles quivering. His breath was shallow, ragged. He could feel his blood leaving him.
He knew he was finished, but he also knew something else. The galaxy would never understand this night. Hunters had come to claim trophies. They had come with fire and claws and certainty. And here, in the silence of a burning forest, they had learned
the truth. Pain was not weakness. Pain was endurance, and endurance was victory. Varkesh laughed, blood bubbling. His mandibles spread in a broken grin, but before the sound faded, the woman turned. Her eyes locked on the sky again. Above, the engines still roared. More dropships, larger, not hunters this time, something heavier, war machines. The next wave was coming. The humans have broken the hunters' army with sheer endurance and defiance, but the sky darkens again. This time, war machines descend. More than flesh and stone can fight. The sky tore open. Engines screamed as leviathans descended. These were not the nimble dropships of hunters. These were war carriers, hulking armored beasts with plating thicker than mountain stone, weapons arrays glowing like newborn suns. The air itself trembled beneath them. The humans stood in the clearing, broken, bloodied, half dead. Their chant had ended. Their bodies shook from exhaustion, wounds leaking freely, skin blistered from fire. Yet none moved to flee. None hid. They simply watched the sky darken under the weight of war. The boy's knife was gone, lost in the mud. He held nothing now but his own breath, sharp and ragged. The woman placed her hand on his shoulder, steadying him. Her eyes never left the sky. The forest groaned as the carriers landed. Soil buckled, roots split, trees collapsed under the weight
of steel. From their bellies, machines marched, not hunters of flesh and claw, but cold giants of alloy, exosuits taller than 10 men, walking tanks with blades for arms and plasma cannons in their chests.
Their eyes glowed with the color of death. The surviving hunters rallied around them, mandibles clicking in relief. Here was salvation, steel reinforcement, the certainty of overwhelming force. The prey would be crushed at last. buried under the tread of machines. One exosuit stepped forward, its chest cannon whining as it powered. It aimed directly at the woman, and then the forest screamed. Not birds, not insects, not humans, the forest itself. Roots erupted from the soil, thick and
gnarled, coiling around steel legs. Vines shot from trees, barbed and thorned, wrapping glowing cannons, pulling barrels toward the earth. The machines staggered. The humans did not move. They only watched as the forest tore itself open. It was not alive. Not in the way flesh was.
it was something else, something older. The silence had been its breath. The waiting had been its patience. The humans had endured not only for themselves, but for it. The first exosuit toppled, dragged down into earth, split open like a mouth. Soil closed over it, swallowing steel whole. The hunters shrieked, mandibles clashing in panic. They fired. Into the trees, burning bark, splitting branches, but the vines came faster. Roots as thick as bodies smashed through armor, branches speared through cockpits. And in the chaos the humans began to move. They did not rush, they did not roar. Step by step they walked forward, broken bodies carrying them into fire. The boy picked up a jagged shard of alien plating. The woman gripped a fallen rifle. Others armed themselves with scraps, bones, stones sharpened by desperation. And when they struck as one. The machines fell, torn by root and rock, dragged under by hands that refused to let go. Hunters screamed as prey swarmed them, dragging them down, choking them with mud and silence. The chant returned, not as words, but as breath. Every step, every strike, every broken body collapsing and rising again. The sound was heavier than thunder, older than fear. Varkesh, bleeding out beneath the tree, watched it all with eyes wide and delirious. His mandibles twitched. He wanted to laugh. He wanted to weep. This was not prey. This was the end of predators. The forest devoured.
Metal, the soil drank blood.
Smoke curled into the heavens like a signal fire to gods. And then silence again. Not the silence of waiting. Not the silence of fear. The silence of victory. The woman stood in the clearing, her body shaking, her rifle heavy in her hands. The boy leaned against her, his face pale, eyes burning. Around them only a handful of humans remained standing. But standing was enough. The war machines were gone. The hunters were gone. The carriers above, seeing the slaughter below, roared their engines and fled back to the clouds. They would return, perhaps, with more, with worse, but not tonight. Tonight, the forest belonged to humanity. The woman raised her face to the sky, eyes reflecting the fading glow of engines. She did not smile. She did not weep. She only whispered, voice hoarse but steady. "Remember us," the boy echoed her louder. "Remember us." The others joined. A chorus of broken voices carried into the smoke, into the stars. And far above, beyond clouds and engines, beyond carriers retreating to warn their kin, something in the dark of space listened. The galaxy would remember. It would whisper of the night hunters came to break humanity. And humanity broke the silence instead. It would whisper of prey that would not stop, would not yield, would not die. It would whisper of the forest that went silent and never gave them back.